My ex-husband and sister hired a private investigator to spy on me and save my failed marriage. I'm Lena, I'm 32, and I'm a speech pathologist who spends her days coaxing voices back into the world, stroke survivors rediscovering consonants, kids turning shy vowels into clear sentences. And it's probably ironic that for someone who makes a living helping people say what they mean, I spent 2 years living with a man who specialized in saying everything except the thing that mattered, and another year learning that silence can be a tracking device if you're not careful, because the first time I noticed the silver Corolla across from my apartment with the windshield shade forever half collapsed like a lazy eyelid, I didn't think surveillance, I thought city life, I thought somebody's cousin who naps between shifts, I thought the universe is crowded and doesn't need me to narrate it. But then the same car was there again on a Wednesday and a Friday and the following Monday, and when I took out the trash and waved just to be a ridiculous, friendly person, the shade twitched and the car rolled away like a hiss, and that's when my therapist's voice stitched itself into my head. Trust patterns over excuses, Lena, and a knot began to form right under my sternum, the kind I hear in patients when they swallow around something that refuses to move. My ex-husband Aaron is the sort of man who tells a story like an Instagram filter. Everything warmed and softened and cropped so the mess sits just out of frame. In the beginning we were pretty in the way polished floors are pretty. Our apartment smelled like coffee and eucalyptus. He brought me flowers for no reason, which I learned later was the reason. He was an assistant principal who liked saying things like "we're building culture" and data-driven compassion, and I thought that sounded noble until I realized it also meant he preferred spreadsheets about feelings to actually having them. The first time he didn't come home until 2 a.m., he said a student needed him, and I believed him because a lot of people in need look like emergencies when you're 28 and in love. The second time I believed him less. The third time I heard myself say, "I don't like the way my body feels around your answers," and that's how I knew I was finally learning a language my work had been trying to teach me. Pay attention to how a sound sits in a throat. We divorced last winter after a year of therapy where he learned the terms stonewalling and avoidant attachment, and used them like charms to ward off accountability. We signed papers on a rainy Tuesday inside an office that smelled like forgotten tea bags. I cried quietly into a paper napkin and he said, "Please don't make a scene," even though I was a damp inhale of a person, and then we walked down the hall like colleagues who had exited a meeting early. And I held myself together in the elevator by staring at an ad that promised to turn your face into a better face, and I thought, mine is fine, it's my life that needs a new cheekbone. I moved into a one-bedroom with a fire escape that catches the morning like a net, and I bought second-hand furniture that looked like it had survived other people's endings. My sister, Naomi, helped me carry a couch up 3 flights while we laughed the way women laugh when they're pushing something too heavy and refusing to be fragile. She and I are 2 years apart, and if you met us you'd say she got the gloss and I got the grit, but gloss is a kind of armor if you squint. I trusted Naomi the way you trust the only other person who knows the sound your childhood house made when it exhaled at 2 a.m. The Corolla appeared 2 months after I moved. At first it was a background actor. Then it landed lines, the driver door opening 2 inches and closing when I stepped outside, a silhouette tapping on a phone the way the car angled just enough to face my stoop. I told myself I was being dramatic. I told myself city, coincidence, cortisol. Then one afternoon at work, while a little boy named Mateo was practicing his sounds with a focus that made me want to frame it, my phone buzzed with a notification, "Unknown AirTag is moving with you." I stared at the screen as if the letters might rearrange into "Unknown chocolate cake has appeared in your bag." But no, it was the tech-age equivalent of a shiver. The message faded, returned, chimed again when I walked to my car after work. I pressed my fingers into the lining of my tote until they hit a cool, flat coin zip-tied deep in a seam that had never had a zipper. I felt the place inside me that nurses a friend or a kid or a patient go very, very still. I went into hospital mode, assess, isolate, act. I didn't stump it. I didn't melt down. I walked across the street to the police station, placed the AirTag on the counter like a cursed biscuit, and said, "I'd like to file a report." The desk sergeant, a woman who had the kind of forehead lines I trust, looked at me for a second longer than routine, then turned to the younger officer and said, "Get the tech log." We typed and nodded and said dates, and the whole time a part of my brain was narrating in 2 tracks, the practical one that remembered to breathe in for 4, out for 6, and the old one that still wanted to apologize for being inconvenient. The officer asked if there was anyone in my life I suspected of tracking me. A list rose up like a nasty bouquet. I said my ex-husband's name. I did not say my sister's. It never even occurred to me to put her on the page where harm goes. They handed me a case number, a card, and advice that sounded like a lullaby if you were tired enough. Vary your routes, check your belongings, trust your gut. I walked home holding my tote away from my body like a stranger, and when I reached my building the Corolla was there, one spot closer, as if proximity were a thesis. I called Aaron because sometimes the shortest path to clarity is the ugliest. He answered on the second ring with the professionally warm tone he uses on parents. Lena, did you put an AirTag in my bag? I asked without an appetizer. Silence, the bad kind, not the healing kind. That's a wild accusation, he said finally, and his words had the shape of a smile but none of the temperature. Is it true? I pressed. I'm concerned about you, he replied, which is what people say when they want their interference to smell like lavender. You've been erratic. Naomi agrees. The name landed like a gloss on tile. I felt my chest chase a breath that didn't want to be found. Naomi. We just listen, we're worried. You moved so fast. You seemed so sure. We thought you might regret it. We didn't want you to be alone if you had a crisis. I stood at my window watching the Corolla watch me. You hired someone to follow me. He inhaled. To make sure you're safe, he said, and then, as if a chorus had cued him, to save the marriage if there was something to save. There are sentences you will remember the temperature of for the rest of your life. That one was frost inside a mouth. I hung up before the part of me trained to make other people comfortable could put a blanket over his narrative. I called Naomi. She picked up breathless, like she'd been running or lying. Hey, she said, too bright. You talked to Aaron? I asked. Silence again. Lena, please don't be mad, she blurted, which is how you know you should be. I hate him for what he did, but he loves you. He's stupid in love. He thinks you made a rash decision. Naomi, I said slowly, as if talking to one of my patients who is relearning words and I don't want to overload the synapses, did you help him hire someone to follow me? Not follow, she said quickly. Check in. Get context. You haven't been yourself. You're so calm it's creepy. Calm. I laughed and it came out like a bark. You mean I'm not begging? She tried again, shifting frames the way we used to shift blame over broken things we never officially confessed to. We wanted to give you a chance to see what you were doing. It's hard to see clearly when you're hurt. So you gave a stranger binoculars, I said. She started crying and old me reached automatically for a tissue I couldn't hand her through a phone. New me let the silence sit down between us. Come over, I said finally. Bring whatever story you think will make this make sense. She arrived in 20 minutes with hair she had clearly flat-ironed to manage anxiety and a bag of my favorite lemon cookies she'd bought like penance. We sat at my small round table, the one she'd helped me assemble with too many Allen keys and not enough swearing. It started with Mom, she said, which was an ambitious first sentence, since our mother lives on a quiet street with roses and opinions and doesn't know how to send a text unless it's an entire essay. She said you were brave, Naomi continued, but then you were almost too okay. It scared me. She twisted her ring, the one I'd sized for her 2 years ago when she got engaged to a man who worships the ground she shops on. Aaron called me because he said he didn't want to pressure you and he wanted to reassure me. He said your commute isn't safe at night. He said he hears about crime every day at school. He said you canceled dinner. He made it sound reasonable. And you said yes, I said. She nodded, small and ashamed. He paid. I asked questions. I thought I was being careful and smart. I swallowed a handful of sharp words because I've learned they come back up like knives. Show me, I said. The texts. She slid her phone across the table, screen unlocked to a thread labeled consultant. I read dates, times, photos. Me at the bodega buying oat milk after 9. Me walking into my building with a bag of takeout. Me unlocking my bike at the clinic. A caption under one photo read, Subject appears emotionally stable, minimal social contact observed. Subject. That word, wearing its little lab coat, made me weirdly want to laugh and throw up at the same time. Emotionally stable, I murmured. What a diagnosis. Another note, encounter with male at 1820, laughter observed, distance maintained. The male was my neighbor, a widower who tells long, beautiful stories about his wife and lends me his drill. I closed my eyes, and behind them I saw my life turned into dots on a map, someone else's cursor linking them into a shape they insisted was a warning. Tell me you see it, I said finally, pushing the phone back. Tell me you hear how dehumanizing this is. Naomi sobbed and nodded and reached for me, and I let her hands find mine because I am softer than I look and because what I needed from her wasn't a performance of guilt but an admission of harm. I messed up, she said. I wanted to help and I chose control instead. It was not enough and it was the beginning, the two truest things about repair. Okay, I said. Here's what happens next. I sounded like me at work, laying out steps to a kid who needs a plan to feel brave. You're going to call Aaron with me on speaker. You're going to tell him he crossed the line not just with me but with you. You're going to tell him there will be no more contact with any investigator. You're going to send me the contract if you have it. And then you're going to take a breath and listen to me say the thing I should have said to you 10 years ago, you don't get to define my danger for me. She cried harder and whispered, I'm sorry, and I believed her the way you believe a person who finally learned a word and is determined to hold it properly. We called Aaron. He answered on the second ring again, like a man who always wants to feel prepared. Naomi, he said warmly. Is Lena with you? Yes, she said, voice shaking. We're together. We know about the AirTag. We know about the photos. We know you lied to both of us by calling it safety. He went very still and then said in his principal voice, let's all calm down, and I felt an old version of me try to obey. But my work has taught me the difference between calming down and shutting up. No, I said. We won't. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to end whatever agreement you have with whoever's been sitting in a Corolla outside my home. You're going to send confirmation. And because I filed a report, you're going to understand that if my face appears in one more photo I didn't take, we're going to finish this conversation with people who carry badges. He sputtered about intention, about care, about how this is what happens when one partner refuses to take responsibility and the other is forced to act. You weren't forced, I said, and my voice surprised me with its steadiness. You were entitled. Those are different muscles. Stop working out the wrong one. He hung up. We sat there, two women with a phone between us like a neutral third. Naomi said she wanted to crawl out of her own skin. I made tea like it could build us new ones. 30 minutes later, Aaron texted screenshots of an email to a consultant terminating services and a pointed note. No further contact authorized. I sent it to the officer attached to my report with a brief summary. Tracking ended, evidence attached. Practical steps do not fix your heart, but they keep the floor from dissolving beneath you. That night the Corolla didn't show. The sidewalk looked like itself again. I slept hard and woke up feeling like I'd run a gentle marathon in my dreams. Here's the part one didn't expect. The nothing that followed felt louder than the something. Nobody rang my bell. Nobody slid out of a car as I passed. My life resumed its small, plodding loveliness, work, patience, a man at the farmer's market who sells peaches and stories about rain. And still, when my phone buzzed with any alert, my body flashed that animal code, duck, run, freeze. The day I realized I had started sitting with my back to the wall in restaurants, I laughed, then cried, then booked an extra therapy session because I know what hypervigilance tastes like and I don't want to chew it for dinner. My therapist said, your nervous system learned a lesson it didn't ask for. We'll help it learn another. She taught me to narrate out loud, I am safe in this kitchen. The stove is off. The door is locked. My toast is overzealous but not dangerous. It felt silly and then it felt like oxygen. I started narrating with my patients too and they loved it. Your tongue knows where to go, your breath is a bridge. Say the yes like you're sending a secret to a friend. I keep learning that what heals in one room heals in another. The conversation with Naomi took more than one round. She wanted to atone quickly, and I wanted to never speak of it again, which is how sisters lose each other. We compromised with a schedule. Every Sunday, coffee on my fire escape, 30 minutes of no avoidance truth. Week 1, she said, I wanted to be the hero, and I said, it is not heroic to bolt someone to the life you think they should live. Week 2, I said, part of me thinks you chose him, and she said, part of me did, and we were both quiet long enough for that admission to stop echoing. Week 3, she brought me a plant that has since thrived because it needs very little and gives a lot. Week 4, we laughed about a sentence our mother would definitely use if she ever learned about any of this, which she won't because the woman deserves a soft retirement from drama. I support the concept of safety but not the execution. By week 6, Naomi had done the longer work, apologized without presenting a bill, examined why she trusts control over conversation, asked her own husband what lines he needed from her and which ones she needed from him. She also told me something that hurt in the way stitches do. When you left, I realized I was jealous of your certainty, she said. I thought if I could make you doubt yourself, I wouldn't have to admit that I doubt myself all the time. I didn't hug her then because I didn't want to use affection like a broom. I said, that makes sense, and let us sit there with it until it softened. Aaron tried twice more to rewrite the story. He sent a long email about the sanctity of marriage and the breakdown of community and how the modern world celebrates quitting. I sent back a paragraph about the sanctity of consent and the difference between quitting and refusing to be coerced. He later asked to meet for closure. That word is a tidy robe people put on to make peeping feel respectable. I answered, no. We're closed. When he replied with a quote about love being patient and kind, I forwarded it to my therapist with the subject line, weaponized Corinthians. We laughed and then she said something that stuck. People will try to hire private investigators for your soul. Your job is to keep the blinds open and the doors locked in the ways that serve you. Spring came. The ginkgo on my block did its dramatic confetti thing. One of my little patients said blue like it had always belonged to him. The widower neighbor lent me his drill again, and this time I finished the shelf on my own and it did not fall. I started seeing someone carefully, like carrying soup. His name is Jonah, he's a paramedic, and the first night he cooked for me he asked if he could put his phone on the counter and leave it there because he hates that everyone scrolls instead of eating. I fell a little in love with his manners right then. On our third date I told him the whole story because I refused to audition for intimacy by pretending I am unscarred. He listened without interrupting, then said, thank you for the map, and I realized that's all I've ever wanted from a person, not rescue, not surveillance, just a willingness to read the legend and respect the scale. One afternoon in June I saw the Corolla again. Same dent in the bumper, same tilt, parked across from my clinic. My stomach performed one of those unfortunate dances evolutionary biologists should apologize for. But when the driver door opened, a kid stepped out, maybe 19, hair in his eyes, a laminated food delivery bag slung over his shoulder. He looked at his phone like it had betrayed him, sighed, and trudged toward a building with the aura of a bad address. My body still had adrenaline to burn, so I walked to the curb, squatted down, and looked under my car the way the policewoman had shown me, along the wheel well, under the bumper, inside the creases that catch leaves. Nothing but city dust and a bottle cap. I stood up and laughed a little and felt my diaphragm let go. I texted Naomi a selfie with my thumbs up and she replied with 7 heart emojis and I'm on your side forever. Please keep teaching me what that means. If you're waiting for a dramatic courtroom scene or a public shaming, you will be disappointed. The PI, whose name I never learned because a part of me didn't want to carry it, dissolved back into wherever people go when they are paid to look without seeing. Aaron changed schools. I suspect he tells a story where he tried everything to save a woman who refused to be saved. That's okay. Stories are a kind of currency and I have my own. It is quieter and truer. I left a marriage that asked me to betray myself. Then the people who couldn't tolerate that turned my life into data points to try to shepherd me back. I learned to read their maps and then drew my own. I am not heroic, I am stubborn about my breath. I help strangers shape their mouths around words every day, and at night I practice my own no, stop, mine, enough, yes, more, here. Sometimes, with certain patients, I use a mirror. I sit them in front of it and we make the sound together, watching the way lips and tongue and jaw collaborate. The mirror work is awkward and intimate and incredibly effective. Last week, after a session where a teenage girl said her name clearly for the first time since a car accident, I stayed in the clinic by myself and sat in front of that mirror and said out loud, "I am safe. I am allowed to choose." My mouth shaped the words like they were foreign at first, then familiar, then mine. On the walk home, I bought peonies because they are ridiculous and joyful and they open when they are ready. The street was ordinary. A dog that hates pigeons, a kid convincing his dad that sticks are swords, a woman humming. My phone buzzed, news alert, not a tracker, and I breathed in for 4, out for 6, thinking about how saving a marriage is none of my job now and saving myself isn't breathless anymore. It's just what I do, one sentence at a time in a voice I can finally trust because I know exactly who it belongs to.